Hello, my DEGENS. How we doing? Today we're doing a little special. So we are sitting down with ultraGM creator, founder, all that good stuff, the man behind the curtain per se, Mr. Evan. Evan, how you doing today?
Good. How you doing? Having
I'm
a
doing well. Yeah, I appreciate you joining me today. I
Thanks for
feel
having me.
like the last couple of weeks we've had a couple phone conversations and I've got to know you a little bit. The concept of ultra is very unique, one of a kind. I think that it's a concept that a lot of people might not understand or know about, but hopefully this video kind of expands the knowledge and helps people kind of streamline exactly what you guys do over there. Before we get into that, though, just tell me how this concept came about. What made you just open this up and say, "Hey, I'm gonna just break this down and turn Madden franchise mode into an actual playable real life scenario."
It was really a couple of things, but at the heart of it, I've always kind of viewed the fantasy and fantasy football as being to be the GM of your favorite team, the team that you've loved your whole life. You suffer through whatever the consequences they go through each year, um, and kind of having that ability to be the GM of that team, but also have it play out in a competitive system like fantasy football where you get a result. And so, for most of us, we followed our teams forever. We know them back and forth. We know everything about the rosters. And we, yell at the screen during the draft that the team's not picking the guys they should be picking. We're complaining about them not signing the free agents they should be signing. And so the concept of Ultra GM kind of puts the user in the role of the GM of their favorite team to build that team the way you think it should be built, and then to play it out fantasy football style through the season.
Nice. Yeah, I think that that kind of appeals to our audience. I think a lot of people that listen to our show and Dynasty understand that, you are that's what Dynasty is. People start with the redraft leagues, the ones where they get together with their home friends or the people they work with and they say, "Okay, like let's get this thing." It's more of a camaraderie, like more of a thing that people do to, have something to do on a Sunday, or they're not really taking it too seriously, but once they get into it, they want to open it up and they go, okay, like let's go to Dynasty where they have player picks. They are looking at, colleges coming in and they value it and you can trade for picks and all that good stuff. So it's almost like, you elevate as you go along. And people that are in Dynasty go to Devi, where Devi is college football. And it's like they get deeper and deeper. This is actually a great concept where people want to just immerse themselves. And I think that it appeals to a lot of people that play Dynasty because they are looking for that next step up. That okay, but this is actually a good concept because you're not just going strictly to college. You have the NFL side. You have this ability to build the team the way that you want to build it. You're working with real life rosters. You're working with rosters that are current. I think that that's really important. That's fun because even when you played in Madden, I mean, I'm older Madden generation. We didn't have the updated. It wasn't the internet that was so to speak. So if you started a Madden franchise mode and they made moves, you were stuck. You had to move them yourself, or
Right.
I think this is a cool concept. Um, let's just try to break it down for people that might not get it yet. So you essentially go in, you choose your team, right?
That's
And
right.
then kind of like lay out the steps from that point on by building a league, how you build the league, and then the first couple steps that you would assessing a roster, and then like how would you take on a team and what would be the first couple things that you would do once you do that?
Sure. So you go on, you pick whatever team you want, presumably the team that you've loved your whole life. You essentially buy your team for the season. The regular price is $30 for the season. If you use the promo code DEGEN, it'll be $5 off, so $25 for the season. And you'll be assigned into two different leagues. So you play in two different with your one team in two different leagues at the same time. One of those two leagues is a 32 team league, mirrors the NFL, same 32 teams, same schedule. And that's the league where all of your transactions take place. That's where you draft, that's where you trade, that's where free agency happens. The players that you build onto your roster from that are also on your team, and so they're in the other league. The other league is a 14 team league that is team specific, right? So let's say you're the 49ers. You choose the 49ers team. Your 14 team league is a 49ers league. One of the teams in that league is you. One of the teams in that league is the John Lynch 49ers. Uh, and that plays each week the same players that the 49ers actually play. And then there's 12 other guys like presumably 49er fanatics that also, are deep into the team, know it well, and they're building their version of the 49ers. So you get put into these two leagues. When the league locks and fills and locks, that's the 32 team league, you'll get the roster of your team, in this case, for our example, the 49ers, as of the start of the league year. That's basically the start of free agency. And so you're not bound by the moves that the team has already made in that year's free agency. It's as if the team shit canned the GM at the end of the season. They hired you in February, and you're going to take over the team from then and kind of build it in your own image. So when the league unlocks, free agency opens, the draft happens shortly thereafter, and the draft is the college draft. So you'll start off picking in the same exact spots that your team picked in the actual draft. And I say you start off there because you can move up and down the board through trade. So you can trade picks, you can trade players, you can move back to accumulate additional picks, you can move up if you're targeting a particular player that you love. All the same kind of things that a GM would do. I think for a lot of us, that trading component during the draft, we all often want to see a lot of movement there. We sit on the mock draft simulators and our Trader Joe moving up and down the board. And here you can do that. So you can try to position yourself to get the players that you want to start building your team.
Yeah, I think that's the most exciting part for a lot of people, where you have this vision in your head. You have this vision in your head where you can essentially build a franchise, and you think that you can do it better than the actual people that run the franchise themselves. And these people that play Dynasty have these trades in their mind, and they try to simulate it in the NFL. Right. Obviously, this is a situation where you can actually do it. You can see if it works. You can see that, if you do have some friends that are fans of the same teams, you can try to build and trade. And I think that it's a great concept, and it is really tickling people, like I said, that want that taste of the ultimate GM experience. And I think that, it makes sense for somebody that is doing the year-round Dynasty stuff, because this doesn't sleep, this doesn't end. Right. And for people that are into college football, how does this appeal to them? Like, you guys do the picks, you have the drafts and stuff like that. Like, break it down from the college perspective, because you are drafting college players, right, presumably, correct, during the draft.
So the draft is the college draft. So, this is an NFL product. So the focus, as a college football fan, the focus is kind of, NFL scouting and NFL potential, with a focus on the players that are reasonably likely to be eligible for the draft that year. So as you're going through the college season, you'll be wanting to look at that, and you'll look at it kind of through the lens of your team. So, if your team has a struggling offensive line and there's going to be a need for offensive line help, your focus during the college season, you might be paying extra attention to offensive line. Obviously, if the team has a quarterback need, you're going to be focused on the quarterbacks in the draft. And if your team has an established quarterback that they're definitely not moving off, you may not be paying that much attention to the quarterbacks, but you might be focused on getting them receiver help. So, I think most of us as fans, we kind of already naturally do that in our, as part of our NFL fandom. And this kind of also, feeds into that. So when you look at it from the dynasty perspective, just like with dynasty, as you said, this is a year-round deal. In fact, because a real GM is really doing his heavy lifting in the off season, this is probably as much or more of an off-season sport as it is an in-season sport. I mean, it certainly goes on through the season and you'll have roster management, but like your real roster building is going to happen in the off season with free agency and the draft and that stuff. So, the idea here is to build the team the right way, through the draft in a sustainable way. You start with that initial roster, but that roster will stay with you in successive seasons as you kind of build it the right way. So if your team is a team that's a real rebuilding team, you may say, hey, this is going to be a 3-year plan. We're going to, get rid of our older players, try to get young, try to accumulate picks and build that way. If your team is sort of more of a, hey, we're close, we think we're a player or two away, you might have a little less focus on the draft and go out and be looking for veterans. Maybe you're trading draft picks away to get the veterans that you think are those missing pieces. So same thing that a real GM would be doing is what you'd be doing here.
Yeah, and just so the viewers understand, this mirrors the actual NFL to a T, essentially, right? So
Right.
the people that are going to be free agents in 2025 in the actual NFL will be free agents in the app, correct?
That's right. So the
And
way free agency works, it's a bit different. So in the NFL, a free agent becomes a free agent when their previous contract expires. They're not in ultraGM. They're not yet a free agent when the contract expires. It's when the contract expires and they then sign a new contract that they become available in ultraGM because the player and the contract are tied together. So we're using real NFL salary cap and real NFL contracts. And so when you approach free agency, just like a real GM, you want to be looking at players both from a pure skill and productivity standpoint, but also from a value standpoint. There are going to be players that you're like, I love the player, would love to have him, and then you see the contract that the guy signs, and it's like, whoa, like that's that's a little bit much. And then there'll be other players that you're not necessarily in love with. They're not superstars, but you see a guy who hey, wait a minute, this guy's going to be a legit number 2 receiver. And he just signed a deal for $2 million a year. That's an incredible value. This is a guy that I'm going to get production for without taking up much of my cap space. And they become a major target for that reason. So that same value proposition of kind of productivity per, $1 million of cap spend that a real GM should be looking at, you also will want to be looking at that stuff as well.
yeah, and this, I can't echo this enough, where this is the best of all the worlds. You are getting a full experience as a GM, and like you in different formats of fantasy football, you aren't going to get that full experience. You're going to get a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But this is great where you had the salary, you are drafting college players, you are working as far as free agency goes, you get to work with that. There's so much. And I think that, it really, like I said, it people that are so far into dynasty and this is the market. These are the people that you want in this because they're going to take it seriously. I don't think it's a format for somebody that is just starting fantasy football. I think it's really, you have to be very involved in this. And it's,
I mean, I think you could be just starting fantasy football. I actually think, and from people I've spoken to, there are people who haven't traditionally been fantasy players, but have been, deep football geeks. And for some of them, I think, some aspects of fantasy, just haven't kind of scratched the itch in the way that I think this can for some of those people. But one of the ways in which, I mean, let's face it, fantasy is awesome and we love it. And it's become a huge, business and all the great things about it. But, it traditionally has completely left the offensive line out of the game. And the offensive line is a huge part of the game. Um, so, we have a full 53-man roster plus a practice squad. All positions are scored, offensive linemen are scored. And so that brings offensive line into the fantasy experience in a way that, in all but a few other places it isn't. And that's important because when you are looking at the college draft, if you're a big draft guy, you can't like look at the draft and pretend like offensive linemen aren't a significant part of it.
Sure.
And so one of the things about our system, and sometimes people ask me this, is like, well, yeah, the offensive linemen are in there, but aren't I still going to want to focus on the skill position players because I'll get more scoring out of them? The answer is no. Our scoring is scaled to the value that the NFL places on the various positions based upon what they're willing to pay the various positions and the draft resources that they use on those positions. So in our model, quarterback's the most important position in football. We all know it. Everyone knows it. And they're the most important position in ultraGM. But then they're followed by left tackles, edge rushers, your kind of shutdown cornerbacks. Those other positions that people often refer to as your premium positions are the top scoring positions. So on average, your left tackle is going to score more than a running back.
Sure.
Now, a guy has a Saquon Barkley 2024 season, he's going to score great. And there may not be any tackles that outscore that, but on average, you're going to get more points from a good left tackle than you will from a garden variety good running back.
Yeah.
So
That's interesting. And then is there scoring for, I know that you said there's IDP stuff going on in this as well. How is scoring for defense working?
So scoring for defense is that's the only formula that's complicated. It includes as many facets of the game as are kind of reasonably available. So there are points involved for sacks, of course, but also hurries, quarterback knockdowns, forced fumbles, fumble recoveries, interceptions, passes defensed, tackles, assists. All of those things have points associated with them. And then there's a component of some of the defensive scoring that is shared with the scoring for offensive linemen. So let me just pivot to the offensive linemen for a second, because that it's often a question like, how do you score offensive linemen? And it's true.
Sure.
There's not a lot of metrics out there, especially for run blocking. What we're using for offensive linemen is Sports Info Solutions, SIS, has a metric called total points. And essentially what they do is they take EPA per play and they break down the EPA on a given play and allocate sort of credit and blame among the players that are on the field, including the offensive linemen.
Gotcha.
We're using their blocking points, subcomponent of total points for offensive line. And then we are also using their points metric for certain aspects of defensive play, basically to try to fill in for those positions where there's often a lot of value that just can't be captured by traditional stats. So, for example, a nose tackle who does a great job clogging the middle, taking on blockers, that guy's probably not going to generate traditional box score stats. He's just not going to be a huge tackle guy typically.
Sure.
So his value is underrepresented by those stats, but SIS has a run defense points metric, and that factors into the scoring for defensive linemen. And then same kind of thing with cornerbacks. So, your shutdown corner, if no one throws at the guy, he's just not going to have a lot of opportunity to rack up box score numbers. So we take into account their coverage points metric as a component of the scoring to help, even out and show sort of the true value of a guy like a Pat Surtain or someone who, is not going to be able to, have massive box score numbers just because they're just not tested enough. They're covering guys too well to be tested that much.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, this all sounds incredible. I think that you and I, have really I guess, broken this down, and what is it that I'm missing that I haven't talked about on this app? Like, and anything that you think people need to hear about, what, we obviously went through almost everything that makes us super unique, but anything that I missed that you think needs to be talked about with this app?
Yeah, so let me talk about the two league structure a little bit more. I mentioned that you're in these two leagues, and kind of what that does, among other things, is it allows you to compete both against friends and family who are fans of other teams. You compete against them in your 32 team league, and you can compete against friends and family that are fans of the same team in your 14 team league. So you have that ability to essentially play against any friend, no matter what their team is. Um, and you can also do that in either of those two leagues, in either a private league or a public league. So if it's a public league, we put you into sort of the next available league for your team. You'd be playing with people you don't know, of course, but you can also play with friends there. So even if you don't have the ability to enough friends that you think you can put together a private league, or you just don't want to worry about managing that, we have a find a friend feature where you can put in your friend's email, find the
Okay.
league that they're in, and then if there is space for you in those leagues for your team, you can join that league instead of the one that we've otherwise allocated to you. So you don't have to. You can, if you have a group of 5 or 6 friends, you guys can still all play in the same league. There will be some other regular people that you don't know, but as we all know from fantasy, I mean, sometimes the people you start off not knowing become people through shit talking and everything
Right.
else over the course of
Yeah.
the season. So that sense of community is still there, and that's something that I think is a great part of ultraGM. The other thing I'll mention is, so there may be times where we don't have a human owner of every team, for example, in a 32 team league. And when that happens, the teams that are not represented by a human owner are CPU managed. That just means that they will play the actual roster of that actual NFL team that particular week. So if you're playing, let's say the Colts are a CPU team that week, you're going to be playing against the Colts actual roster, and it really doesn't affect gameplay at all. You'll get a score, they'll get a score, and you'll see how you did compared to the real Colts. Just like in your 14 team league, when you play against the CPU version of that team, you'll see how you do compared to the real GM of that team, so to speak. And when you're playing in your 14 team league against the other human owners, you'll see how you compare against other football geeks that are, truly invested in their team and care about it. So, I expect the level of play to be pretty high. I think this is really primarily going to attract people that are pretty invested in their NFL fandom. And then just the other thing that I want to mention, we did talk a little bit about the salary cap, and that being a part of this. That shouldn't be viewed as too daunting. I mean, we've included it for reality, and because look, if you want to claim you can do it better than the real GM of your team, you got to have the same restrictions and constraints that guy's got. So the
Sure.
salary cap is critical. But we do have transaction calculators. So before you make any moves, whether it's releasing a player, signing a player, making a trade, you can run it through the calculator, and it will tell you what the cap impact of that deal is. So you're not going to need to maintain a spreadsheet, pull out a calculator, pull out a pad and do any kind of manual calculations. That kind of stuff, it will be done for you. But you will need to think out, okay, what are the long-term ramifications of doing it? And it kind of forces you to do that, which I think is going to be one of the sort of nice side benefits of this. I think it's going to be a lot of fun for everybody. But in the same way, you mentioned Madden, and there are obvious parallels to kind of Madden franchise mode here. One of the things about Madden, I know, when my son was young, trying to teach a kid about football is hard. Like, it's a
Mm-hmm.
complicated game. It's tough to
Sure.
get. And I know my son and a lot of people I've talked to, they didn't get it until they got into Madden and they had some control over the process themselves. They had that sort of experience doing it. And I think we'll all kind of get that, a richness to that fan experience from the GM perspective by having to actually look at on a transaction basis, like, okay, what are the cap ramifications of doing this? Does this make sense for the team? Do I want to take this dead cap hit? Et cetera. I think the process of doing that will provide a richer fan experience for us, in addition to just the pure sort of fun and competition associated with playing the game.
Yeah, it gets you into the front office essentially, and you're invested in these moves that you might have overlooked, like the salary cap moves, these things that teams do that might be a little I guess strange to the average viewer, somebody that doesn't understand salary dumps or understand, trading X amount of players for cash considerations or anything like that. That this stuff is tough to comprehend just because you're not in it. You don't really have any reason to be invested in the money side of football. You're just there to watch the game and watch them score touchdowns. Like, I think that a lot of people just sit on the couch and want to see scoring. But I think that this would definitely be an option for people that are casual to go into it and fully understand football for what it is.
Right.
And I think that's great. Like, you're right. Madden opened up the eyes for a lot of people,
Right.
that might have not even understood how football is really played. And,
Right.
and, when I first started playing Madden, it was step back and throw the deepest ball that I possibly could.
Right.
There was no game plan or no understanding of the game. It was just get the ball down in the end zone.
Right.
So yeah, I think this is great. I love everything that you guys are doing over there. I'm in there right now. I'll be starting a couple leagues up with the guys in my Discord. Definitely try to, get the full force of use there. And I'm excited, man. I think it's
Yeah.
it's awesome.
It's gonna be a lot of fun. And like I said, I mean, I think, you know, one of the things that was part of the idea behind it was trying to connect our fan experience and the fantasy football experience. I think traditionally those two things have been totally different. Maybe you draft in your fantasy league, some players that are on your preferred team, but I know for me, sometimes I was like, well, I don't know if I want to double down on them. Maybe I want to hedge and choose, rivals players so that if they have a great game, at least it's a consolation prize for me in
Sure.
fantasy, and vice versa. Here, you're going to start off with a team that's going to be, 50, 60% start in the first year, matching the roster of your team. And when your team is playing their rival, whoever that is, you're also playing your counterpart who's a fan of that team in ultraGM. So as you watch that game, you're watching both, your own team for, pure football purposes, but you're also essentially watching a good portion of your fantasy matchup. And then in subsequent years, because NFL rosters turn over, somewhere 30 to 40% or so a year, as the years go on, your team will start looking more and more different from the team you started with. And it will then be sort of purely your team. So, in only a couple of years, the team you started with, where it's like, okay, you were handed a bunch of players that you didn't necessarily choose, you'll have the chance to sort of shape that into a team that's a truly customized team for you, where you have made the decision to have that player on your roster for essentially all of your players.
Yeah, and it's truly an experience where you can find out if you are better at building a franchise than the actual guy that's running your own franchise.
Right.
And you can look down 2 years, and if you have a successful team and the team that you mirrored it after in the NFL is not doing well, it kind of is a telling thing for you. Obviously, everything isn't fluid, but it's a fun concept. It's fun to look at. And
Yeah.
um
And one
yeah,
thing
if
I
you
say, I mean, I feel like, I hope people don't feel too daunted by it, because there is a lot going on, but at the same time, I mean, it's a game, And if you use the promo code, it's $25 for the year, which, I mean, you can't even buy your team t-shirt for $25 anymore. So, it's not a massive investment. It's going to be fun to do. Don't feel daunted that, like, oh, it's scary. I don't know if I can win my league in year one. I mean, it's not about necessarily the year one. It's about, sort of building the team and learning as you go to do it. So, okay. I mean, if it turns out that you don't end up winning in year one, so be it. And in that regard, I think, it's important that the two league structure is also kind of important for, there are going to be some teams that are not likely to win the 32 team league in year one. If you're a Panthers fan this year, you're probably not going to win your 32 team league, but you have a great chance of winning your Panthers league. You're in your 14 team league. So no matter how bad the season goes for your team, and let's face it, there are going to be some teams where the season goes badly, and by mid-season, that team is not going to make the playoffs, but you still have a chance in their 14 team league to win that league, to show that you at least, took that roster and did it better than anybody else, and that you'll have a leg up in building that team so that, year 2, year 3, you might have that team in position to be competing in the 32 team league. And I think that's part of the fun. In some ways, starting with the teams that have more of a rebuild is kind of more of a challenge. I think in Madden, right, a lot of people, choose sort of rando, not so great teams for that challenge component. And, if you happen to be a fan of a team that's probably not a contender in 2025, that's okay, because you're going to have, in some ways, maybe more fun than the folks who are taking over contender teams, because they're probably not going to want to change too much. If you're taking over the Eagles, and I'm not discouraging anyone from doing that, because you have a great chance of winning your 32 team league, but you're probably not going to be stripping down that roster and being as active with the moves as someone who is taking over a lesser team.
Yeah, it's never fun to take over a team in Madden that is already set it and forget it. Like it was the Patriots when I was growing up. You didn't want to mess around with that roster too much, even though I'm a Patriots fan. And it was like, what can you do? You just ride the wave essentially. You're gonna win, but there was no trading or moving around pieces, and
Right.
it was cut and dry. So you might as well just play the story mode at that point if you're gonna do something like that.
But the same kind of thing, even if you're one of those teams, you may not be wanting to make a ton of moves, but in your 14 team league, you're still competing against, other folks in that league that are, also running the Eagles. And so, the difference is, even if there will probably be some, especially in year one, some similarity among the rosters there, but there'll still be a lot of differences. And the thing that determines who wins that league are going to be probably things like, third receiver, like, backup tackle, swing tackle who ends up getting thrust in there, and whoever is best positioned for those little details, some of those little positions and details that do have a big impact on how seasons turn out in the NFL. The people who do that the best will be the ones that will win the 14 team league for a team like the Eagles or the Chiefs.
Yeah, and not to say you don't take these teams, and things change obviously, and roster construction is important. So you can go in, you can win the league, the 32 team league, but then you're gonna have to make some difficult decisions at some point when it comes to the salary cap and stuff. Like the Eagles, for example, they're definitely gonna have to make some moves. I don't think AJ Brown can have a new contract and they can still hold on to
Right.
everybody else, like a Saquon Barkley and everybody. There's going to have to be some difficult decisions. So it could be a fun thing to do when you're looking at a team in the NFL and you have to make these decisions to see if you make the right ones compared
Right.
to the ones that they make. So, yeah, I mean, if you guys aren't in this, if you haven't signed up yet, go to ultragm.com. You can also go over to ultraGM on X, and I believe that you have that pinned on your profile there as well. If you go into there, you can sign up, use our promo code DEGEN, DEGEN. So that's DEGEN. And you get a discount on the actual price for a team over there. Man, I think we covered a lot of it, man. But like,
We did.
anything else you want to drop before we get out of here?
Yeah, so just, I mean, it's up on the screen there. My email is evan@ultragm.com. And if you have any questions or you run into any issues, trying to, access the site or whatever, which you shouldn't, but if there's any kind of questions you have about follow up, you can direct them to me directly, or you can drop them in the comments, and we'll try to, address them there so that everyone can hear about it.
Awesome. Evan, well, I appreciate you joining me today. I appreciate you sharing all of the wealth of knowledge that you have as the creator of ultraGM. That is ultraGM, ultragm.com. Definitely go over there, sign up, get a team, play against me. I'd love to do that. We're doing the Discords. So I have a channel in my Discord dedicated to this. If you guys aren't in Dynasty DGen Discord, come on over. We can talk about Ultra. We can talk about the concepts. We can talk about trades, whatever it is that you guys need help with. So, like I said, definitely the new wave right now, and get on it before it blows up, because hey man, if it gets too crazy, I don't know if these teams are gonna be $30 anymore. I got to be honest with you.
Let's hope not.
I would get in. I would get in before this gets bigger than it can be or should be. So,
Yeah.
I appreciate you guys joining us today, and we will catch you guys soon. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.